I'm Phil Kibet again, back with Chris Worley, and now we're going to discuss John Hurley's situation. And, we're talking about John. We're also talking about a generation up because his uncle has been so important in his life. And we're talking about his concerns, John's concerns for the generation down and John himself. And at the heart of this case, we have one great big chunky asset, which is the C Corporation they started years ago with probably no basis, but now it's worth $25 million. And he's at a turning point in his life, and he wants to think of it. He says pulling a Bill Gates and doing something for the community. Well, what kind of jumps out at you as you reviewed those facts?
Well, one of the first things was the age. I think this is the moment, 55 to 60, a lot of people have their final monetizing event, and you begin to realize you're not going to live forever. You're taking inventory of the impact you've had, and you're taking steps to say what could be the impact through the end of my days. Mm-hmm. And the impact before, he has a very close relationship with Uncle Bill, and Uncle Bill put him onto just-in-time inventory management way before his competitors, and that really kept him first in the market, and no one ever really caught up with him. So he feels very strongly that he wants to support Uncle Bill, and he knows Uncle Bill is very proud of his independence, but they're pretty candid about Uncle Bill's finances, and he wants to do something to honor him. Because Uncle Bill, remember, is a very distinguished academic, and I think the way we're going to do that, or the way we're going to see John agree, is to do some type of charitable remainder trust, probably a charitable remainder annuity trust for the lives of Uncle Bill and Aunt Victoria. And then what's left in the trust will be supporting the philanthropy that honors Uncle Bill.
Now thinking of John and generation down, I mean, clearly he's a very entrepreneurial guy. He's got a serial entrepreneur mentality. He'd probably want to carry that over into his philanthropy. He has concerns about leaving too much to the kids. He wants to get them involved and see if he can have a positive impact on them while they're still, to some degree, influenceable. There's a whole technical thing about what do you do with the CRT asset. What do you think about him in terms of his maturity as a philanthropist?
Well, I think he's in for an education, whether he wants it or not. He's been in a business where he's been the driver of the agenda, very control-oriented, and that's been responsible for his success. And he's going to be temperamentally suited to see if he can do that himself. We know that feels guilty about making his fortune through the offshoring of jobs because he had to be the low-cost producer. And there are plenty of efforts done, plenty of studies that have attempted to see what could be done to bring jobs back to the United States. He may find that this is something not only his philanthropy, but no one else's philanthropy is going to be able to cure. But I think he's going to need to go through the education process because he's not going to be a fellow that's going to accept at some expert's face statement that been tried, didn't work, go on to the next thing. But this will be good because I think he's going to realize some of the limits of what philanthropy can do. It cannot save the world. One of the heads of the Ford Foundation used as a criterion for giving, have we left things better than we left it before? Mm-hmm. That sounds like an incredibly modest standard, but it really isn't.
Right.
And I think that's what, as John goes through his education, he's going to take some solace in that in the end.
Right. And when we're doing philanthropic planning, one thing we can think about is now, do it later, do it at death. And the techniques can be now, but the impact later, like a CRT, you do it now, but the impact is later. Other techniques, the impact is now. Do you think he's a do it now or do it later kind of guy or do it at death kind of guy?
He's definitely not a do it at death guy because he would worry about how it's all turned out. And I think he's an entrepreneur, so I think he appreciates the value of, I'll call it seeding projects, creating prototypes. Mm-hmm. Maybe the way to start is a relatively modest amount in a foundation, maybe $1 million, and it's parceling out $50,000 or $100,000, because he's got to he's going to be from his engineering background himself, he's going to try to figure out, what am I measuring? How do I know things are getting better?
Right.
As opposed to an intangible feeling of feeling good,
Right.
and providing education to someone.
And if he starts small and he starts now, that seems to address his other concern about the children.
That's
not
right.
Not airlifting tons of money to them at death and hoping something good comes out of it, and not depriving them of inheritance necessarily, but starting small, starting now, starting with them,
Right.
and seeing how they do and keeping it flexible.
That's right, because we know that his daughter Maria is very interested in environmental causes and gay and lesbian causes. That may not be his initial cup of tea, but it's, for him, it can be a training ground to see how she's doing.
Right.
And then Albert, I'm not sure he's got yet the philanthropic impulse, but maybe he's going to be the guy who wants to fund research at a major university,
Right.
or improve mathematical education. Right. Maybe Albert's a prototype philanthropist in being. He just doesn't know it. He's still very young. He's not in the real world in the sense of having a social life or family responsibility.
Right, and there's a family tradition that's evolving. Maybe they get involved with that. So let's think now technically. Now we're shifting gears.
Yes.
I think we've got the general framework here. Technically, the issue is we've got a C corporation, not an S corporation, which makes it a little bit easier. What would you do with a C corporation to advance these objectives?
Well, the C corporation is going to be an excellent candidate for the funding of a charitable remainder trust that can be generating income. And remember, the measuring life for a CRT doesn't have to be just life. It could be for a fixed period of years. So this doesn't have to be, quote, the big gift or the ultimate gift. It might be a gift of $1 million,
Right.
where he's having income for, say, a 5-year period or a 10-year period. And he may even decide that income that he's receiving, he's using that to parcel it out
Right.
to charities. But that's sort of, quote, my charitable piggy bank.
So you could put it all in there and sell it. He could put some in there and sell it, and sell some inside,
Right.
some outside. He could also put some in and buy it back as stock
Yes.
redemption. That could be
Yeah.
a simple thing you could do pretty quickly.
That's right,
That
long as
doesn't-
it's not a prearranged
Right.
transaction.
That doesn't really address the let's do it now standpoint in terms of making grants, getting the kids involved. What could he do with the C corporation now that would result in their having a bucket of dollars they can make immediate grants from? Foundations are not going to work, right? You can't put a C corporation, a closely held C corporation, a closely held business in a foundation. That's like all the foundation rules militate against that.
Right.
So where would you?
Well, I think you're going to have to examine a donor-advised funds. There are donor-advised funds that deal with what I'll call unique assets or hard-to-value assets, or what I'll call illiquid assets for the management of their philanthropy. Now, there'll be the control issue on that, because remember, with the donor-advised funds, John will be able to make, quote, recommendations, and the recommendations will largely be involved, but that may just be enough that causes some angst. But I think that could still very well meet his needs.
Right. Okay. So we transition some of the money, let's say, into a donor-advised fund. They can start making grants. Some maybe get sold in the CRT. Some get sold out of the CRT. So he's got some money there on the side he can do with what he wants.
Right.
We start making grants with the donor-advised fund to family causes and charities. And then with the money he's got outside, maybe eventually that goes into a foundation.
Yeah, he could decide he wants to fund the foundation during lifetime, or may be wait until death, or fund during lifetime and see how Maria and Albert are going to be responding to being a trustee of a
If we're
foundation.
going to make referrals, let's say we see our job in part as being a talent scout.
Yes.
And surrounding John with the resources he needs, so we're not impersonating experts in areas. We obviously need an attorney. We need a really good attorney.
Yes.
This should not be the first time somebody has set up a CRT or done a buyout of a C corporation in a
Yes.
CRT. We want an experienced person. Are there other experts you would see as being valuable in a case like this?
Yeah. Maybe the first one I'd actually go to wouldn't be the technical advisors. Whether it's, I'll pick a name, the Rockefeller Brothers Funds, someone who, an organization that has deep research, deep resources into the type of issues. John really has much more to think about than he can ever imagine. He may totally come out of this and think, this was a noble intention, but this is not one I can solve. Maybe he's going to pick something that could be one that addressed maybe more incrementally. Maybe just trying to improve mathematic and scientific education at an early age? I don't know,
Right.
but he
Right.
needs the education.
Right. At the very least, we could do is loan him a few books on strategic grant
Yeah.
making. Have him get a taste of it. Maybe we can introduce some people in town who've worked on similar
Yeah,
causes.
because that's where the community foundations, they're another a strong area of information and contacts. And John may surprise us and say, I've got some ideas of what charities I want, which is great, but he probably is a fellow who likes to vet his choices, and a community foundation can be a great way to do that.
I think we've got a lot to go back with, and thank you very much for your thoughts.
My pleasure, Phil, always.